and welcome to everybody to in this important webinar on water struggle around the world. My name is Fatou Diouf. I'm working for PSI Public Service International as the project coordinator in French-speaking countries in Africa. So welcome everybody, welcome to the speakers, welcome to the participants. I'm now giving the floor to Maren to talk about the struggle of Stop the War. Thank you. Maren, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thanks, first of all, for everybody to have joined us here. And I'm really happy that you have accepted this invitation for the last of the World Without Walls 2020 webinar series. And just to give a bit of an intro on what World Without Walls is. It's an initiative that was born exactly 4 years ago, and it was really in response to Trump's victory, based on an electoral campaign that promised a big, fat, beautiful wall. It triggered then that call from Palestine and Mexico for a world without walls that came to the rest of the world. And very quickly, over 400 organizations and movements and networks from across the world endorsed that. It seems that when Israel started building that wall, it was really a wall of that started up an entire series, a real boom of walls. And now we are having over 70 walls across the world that are border walls or walls on occupied territory. In fact, instead of tearing down Israel's apartheid walls, what the powers that are around the world have done is to make it a political fashion, a symbol of that racist far right that shares with Israel the same values of apartheid, supremacy, and repression and colonialism. And now Trump is actually gone, but the walls evidently remain as well, because even if he was one of the few to really make it an electoral campaign, he definitely didn't start the walls. On the contrary. And in fact, in World Without Walls, since the beginning, we haven't been only talking about physical structures of walls, but really about that myriad of ideological, systemic, legal, and economic tools that the oppressors use to bar access to justice. And the big ongoing wall of colonial or neo-colonial capitalist oppression unites really, and the struggle against this wall unites the peoples and the movements that are represented by the amazing speakers and the amazing chair that we are having today in this webinar. And we have chosen today a very specific wall, the water wall, i.e. denial of access to water as yet another wall of injustice, another barrier in front of justice, freedom, and equality. And evidently across the world, people are struggling for their water rights against criminal corporations, states, and the global systems. And Israel knows very well that water is not only a life-giving element, but can be a tool for expulsion, repression, dispossession, the creation of a water apartheid. And I'm very happy to have everybody here with us and to raise the question really beyond the experiences that we are, and each of you is bringing to the table or to the Zoom room here. What is it that we can do to really join and link these struggles? And just to close it up, I'm really grateful on behalf of Stop the Wall and the Palestinian COP26 coalition to welcome you here and that you have all accepted to be here to end up this global series of webinars in this global and really important way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maureen, for this wonderful word, for welcoming everybody to this important webinar. As you said, water struggle. Water is essential in life, and we all know it. And it's a human right and a human need. Like as you said it, Maureen, corporate greed and states are playing with the life of billions of persons because of selling that goods, offering that good to those who have money, and those who don't have, they don't have that need. I would like, after this comment of Maren about her work, about the important work that are doing, Stop the War, to present a little bit my organization, PSI. It will not be too long. I will just like give you an overview of what we are doing as PSI and our work on water. So who are we as PSI? Public Service International is a part of the original movement of international united group of socialists, trade unionists, and workers that created a link to struggle for the working class around the world. Actually, we have like 700 affiliates in 154 countries, and we represent 3 million workers around the world. Our members are working in public administration and public utilities such as water, sanitation, electricity, and solid waste. They operate public transport and maintain public space, work in social, cultural, and educational services as library, museum, kindergarten, school, and university. They are health and social service worker, firefighter, emergency medical first responder, and municipal. So as an international federation that is representing public workers, we are fighting for an universal access to quality public water, quality sanitation and energy services. And we want a world where everybody has safe public water on tap whenever needed. So, we want a world where clean public energy is delivered to our home and governed in public interest. We want a world where these essential services are provided to everyone, regardless of their ability to pay or not. So even if you cannot have money to pay a water bill or an electricity bill, you may have money. You may have water or electricity. This is what we are fighting for as PSI. And then we want a world where the workers delivering these utilities can live in dignity with respect for their union rights and quality employment conditions. But in this world, as Maren said it earlier, privatization of water, sanitation, and energy sector has been promoted by austerity politicians and many global institutions, including the World Bank and the IMF. They are using some model and rising prices, and that means that many families will struggle to pay their bills and suffer, and the investment in those sectors are leading to some catastrophe. And while utility services might seem like a local issue, their quality and governance is tied to global policy and issue. We believe that global and regional institutions can impose privatization or austerity policy. That imposed privatization and austerity policy need to be challenged. Indeed, access to potable water is essential to survival for all living beings. Safe sanitation is the key to reduce disease and illness. This means that water needs to be governed as a common and public good. Water supply and sanitation are natural monopolies. It can't be given to anyone else. It simply does not make sense to run a parallel set of pipes or to build parallel reservoir or treatment plants to serve a city or region instead of in another one. This means that these services simply do not work based on a normal market dynamic. There is a mountain of evidence that you can see in our website, PSI, and also in the website of our research unit, PSI-RU. You can see all that evidence for why private corporations should not be given monopoly power, especially when it concerns essential public services like water. This is absolutely the case for water supply. When corporations are given control of a water supply, they typically cut wages of workers. They lay off workers and attempt to break trade union power. We can see it especially in Africa, in our context. We see that many of trade unionists are fired because they were against that privatization, because they want a better life for workers. So the other tactics used to increase profits is to exclude poor neighborhoods. This low rate of bill payment from the geographic zone of company responsibility. So, for example, I can give here the example of my country. Maybe Muhmmed Lamin from AfricansRising can attest what I'm saying. Actually, in Dakar, we have like in some area, you don't have water because in this area, people are not paying too much of the bill are not too high. It's less than maybe 10 euro. And in other cities where people are having big garden, are having pool, that's paying a lot of money. These people are having are receiving the water because they have the money to pay their bills. But the poor neighborhood, they don't have this. They don't have the money. This is a very big discrimination. If we are all agree that water is a human right, a basic human right. Another tactic is used by corporates, and it is to install prepaid meter with disable water access until payment is made. And here we can give the example in South Africa, where in some area, they have these prepaid meter. And if you don't pay, you will not have money. Even if you can die without money, it's not the problem. You have to give the money and then you will have the water. This is some kind of tactic used by corporates to have money from people. This is show us how those corporates are greedy, and they were not interested by people, but just by their profit. And as PSI, what we are fighting with our global campaign is to have people over profit and to fight against all that corporate greed. So in our research, we show that decades of water privatization around the world was led to disastrous impact on local communities. But the good news is the tide is turning. Hundreds of cities have already chosen to remunicipalize their water supply, and unions were playing a key role in the fight for public control. We know that as PSI, we know that this battle cannot be won without engaged local activists and unions. Campaigns against privatization are political. The key decisions are made by elected officials, who then pass on the decision for implementation to the executive agency. This means, for example, that the manager of the city water will not be the person to decide for or against privatization. The mayor and the city council may take the decision. or it may be the state provincial governor, or it may be the national cabinet with the key role of finance minister and possibly even the prime minister or the president himself. I can here give the example of the privatization here in Senegal and also the privatization and in Cameroon and the decision of the president Paul Biya to return the national water company to the public hand. This is also a very big victory for all water fighters. So any campaign against water privatization needs to create sufficient political pressure to counter the behind the door pressure of the privatization advocates. Crucially, it means that trade unions need to act in alliances with other groups in the community or country. It is often the case that members of such alliances have never worked with each other. And our meeting in Dakar last January was the proof that many associations and trade unions are working for the same goal, but they don't know each other and they never work each other around to achieve the same objective. Therefore, it is important to act early enough to build strong partnership. And this trust is crucial, especially as campaign may require quick and unforeseen action. It also requires that the alliance partner recognize their own strengths and weaknesses, such that they can reinforce and complement each other. And because of all this, PSI is supporting local activists and union members through sharing knowledge from campaigns around the world. PSI is also helping build strong coalition between NGOs, community groups, and unions to find for quality utilities. PSI is also lobbying against privatization of essential utilities, such as water, at the global level by opposing structural adjustment programs and advocating for public solutions. So as you can see all the example of privatization and all the example of remunicipalization of water in the world that PSI worked with in our website, and also, as I said it earlier, in the website of our research unit. So as I said, I did not want to be long, but unfortunately, I had many things to say here. And I will actually give the floor to Muhmmed Lamin Saidykhan from AfricansRising, who will talk about the water struggle in Africa in the first part. And also, he will talk about a program that they are launching in AfricansRising, that is rewriting history. Muhmmed Saidykhan is a Gambian, a neighbor. He's the human rights activist, and he's also the coordinator of AfricansRising for Justice, Peace, and Dignity. AfricansRising is an emerging, decentralized, citizen-owned movement of people in formation, working for justice, for peace, and dignity. It seeks to foster Africa-wide solidarity and unity of purpose with people of Africa to build the future we want. A right to peace, social inclusion, and prosperity. As a human rights activist, he organized widespread protests to get long-time Gambian dictator Yahya Jammeh to step down. And I personally remember that he was also in Lomé, where he had some trouble with the president there. And thank you very much for joining us, Muhammad. Actually, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Fatou. And then hello to everybody who is listening. And greetings to all of you. I'm happy to be here. Regards to all the great brains and minds on this panel. I salute you all. So as Fatou have given that in-depth intro about Africans Rising, as well about Muhmmed Lamin. Yeah, what we are talking about is very critical, very essential, that nobody can live without water on Earth. That is why it becomes the most important, to me, thing that a human life needs to survive. So having said that, scientists will tell us that about more than 70% or more of our body is water. So that means water makes us to survive. Again, water in itself is life. If I stay for a few days without water, it can kill me faster. Again, water gives me to become a human being. From birth to where we are right now, we need water for survival, for sanity, for everything that will make us human as people. So that means that make water as a very, or the most important basic need, even more important than food. Again, this is why I think the world bodies that represent us as human beings everywhere we are recognize water as a basic and fundamental human rights. So talking about water and water rights and water privatization in the world and particularly in Africa, it's a very important topic. It's a very important topic and it's a very timely topic to be discussed. I actually happen to live in a continent that is endowed with the much resources on the earth. But we have seen over the years that brutal dictatorship and regimes, plus colonization effects and neo-colonial agenda have gradually and continuous to deprive citizenry from these basic needs, the most important basic need, through greed, corruption, and a lot of their self-interest or self-perpetuation rule that they want to enforce. Africans Rising for Justice, Peace, and Dignity is a Pan-African movement of movements that vow or created, or is created to fight for justice, peace, and dignity. The last part, that is dignity, is very critical for us as people living in Africa. From the colonial time to now, we have seen that the communities and the people have been deprived from having a dignified life through the plundering of the resources of the continent and the people. We should not have a problem in Africa to have access to water, but unfortunately, many communities and my own communities where I live have been going to bed without water, have been spending nights on queues or searching for water when we are already endowed with a lot of water, underground, fresh water. A new phenomenon of privatizing water is on the rise in Africa. A lot of our governments are conniving with dangerous and bad multinational companies to privatize the water processing companies that are charging a lot of money, that are not seeing human face, they are not seeing dignity of the people again, but what they are seeing is money and how much money they're going to make out of the waters. And if you don't work together as civil society people, coalitions, networks, religious bodies, youth movements, and all the people who are interested around fighting for the rights and survival of human beings, we will be challenged with seeing people dying because of lack of water. I will say that these companies that have been privatizing water on the continent and elsewhere are more interested in money. They don't mind if you are going to go bed hungry or what without water. They don't mind when they are going to bed thirsty. What they see is money, making money out of the waters. So that is making it very scary. So that's why Africans Rising and other bodies like PSI, with Blue Planet and others have came together in Dakar last year to really dig into the challenges that we are facing as a continent in terms of water privatization and the challenges that it comes with. To be able to challenge what I call water grabbers, water grabbers summit that is going to happen in Dakar next year, that we are trying to organize ourselves to be very strong and speak bigger voices. Based on my activism fighting against dictatorship and brutal regimes on the continent, including my country, Gambia, I've learned that the leadership of these nations, of our nations, are very much, critical. But they listen to two kind of voices or methods that speak to them very well. One is numbers. So it's high time for us to really organize ourselves if we really want to stay on this earth and enjoy the dignity. Because without water, we're completely going to lose our dignity. So it's a matter of must and it's a matter of urgency for the civil society formations to work together and work in coalitions, bring in all our tactics and strategies together, as what we have alluded to earlier, to be able to challenge the water grabbers formations, including World Bank and IMF. World Bank and IMF have been encouraging countries to privatize water, to really be able to provide water access to everybody. But the privatization of water is actually drilling a lot of people, denying a lot of people and communities, poor communities, from water, access to water. They're drilling all the great waters that we have underground and bringing these great waters to the privileged citizens or privileged business people and denying the communities of access to water. What it's doing is the process is actually drying down the wells that the communities can have easy access to. When you dig a bit of meters, you have access to water. So now you go into communities, especially in the rural areas in Africa. I used to live in Kenya, in Kajiado County. Miles and miles of wells will be dug to be able to access water. But a few days, it goes dry again. People and animals are suffering. A lot of animals are dying without water. So lack of access to water is actually even depriving people from food in those communities. In South Africa, you can go there, water privatization have denied a lot of people of access to sanitation. Thousands of jobs have been lost with water privatization. You come to Dakar here in Gambia, women will be queuing on the roads to access water for the whole of the night, from 12 p.m. to 5 in the morning or 6 in the morning, just to access water. This is what water privatization is doing to our communities. So a woman who is a grassroots woman or smallholder woman who is queuing to access water the whole night, have to wake up in the morning and cook for the family, laundry and doing it. So what are we doing to the communities? We are literally killing human beings, directly. This is what our governments and multinational companies are doing to people, citizens. And this have to end now. We need to work together to bring back the dignity of the people. It is high time for us to really rise up and raise their numbers. Our governments listen to the numbers. They listen to the numbers. When we don't have numbers, they don't care. But they listen to the numbers because numbers speak volume. Numbers is the one that put them into power. So if we don't listen to numbers, we act on them and kick them out of power. Again, we need to be able to use media effectively as citizenry. Social media is available for all of us to be able to use effectively. If I don't know your problem, I'll not be in sympathy with you. A lot of communities are there crying of lack of access to water, Their waters have been drained by multinational companies in connive with governments, charging high prices for private sector or for private citizens who are privileged, and denying this citizenry of access to water. What are we doing about it? What do we know about it? If we don't put it out there, our challenge is out there to the social media and the media out there to be able to pick it up so that we can mobilize the efforts. If I don't know your pain and don't see your pain, I cannot be in sympathy with you. So it's high time for us to blow this information out, the challenges that people are faced with, so that people can be in sympathy. They can really be able to use those stories to touch the minds and hearts of the citizen, the general citizenry, to be able to challenge these powers through the effective use of media. Africans Rising have been working a lot on, promoting and advancing the access to justice, peace, and providing provision of dignity to Africans. We have recently dig into the effects of, or the root cause of racism that have connected to us to dig into colonization and the effects and its effects on the African people wherever they are. And what this campaign, what we call Rewrite History campaign, is telling us is that the colonial masters and their systems have, prepared a lot of mindsets of our leadership and our policies to be in a capitalist mindset. What we are seeing, what our leaders are seeing is just money, how they can make money, how they can get themselves richer and getting richer, while the poor people are getting poorer, losing their dignity. So this campaign is actually digging into all the atrocities that have been caused by our former colonial masters and holding them accountable to really rewrite their wrongs, to really apologize, to really also campaign the debts that they say African governments are owing them. It is high time for us to really repatriate, the challenges that we are faced with. The colonial masters have put in laws that have said governments are in control of everything on the continent or in countries, that give them the right to privatize water that is owned by everybody, privatize land that is owned by everybody, that's supposed to give me food on the table, that's supposed to give me water to be able to survive on earth. If that government is insane, is not even seeing me as a human being, privatizing all what need to help me to survive. And this is all things, all laws, all policies that have been put in by colonial masters, and our governments are not able to change this. They are using it to their advantage. And this is what is happening. So the effects of colonialization and the whole process of democratic rule in Africa is a big challenge for survival of the poor communities. It's getting them poorer. Africans Rising name in itself came as to challenge the narrative of Africa is rising. You might be hearing it everywhere, that Africa is rising, the GDP rise, all of that. But what is GDP rise? How is it reflecting on the common person on the African continent? The common person, the woman, the rural woman, the smallholder farmer in the rice fields out there are deprived from their rights because governments have privatized water. Governments have sold land, have given our forests. And then all the effects of climate change is affecting us, is drying the wells and all that because of the ill practice of our governments, how they are doing business. They're not thinking about the citizenry. So we came up with the name of Africans Rising to really build this Pan-African movement and said, Africans Rising, we want to challenge the narrative of Africa is rising, that we don't see Africans rising, but what we want to see is Africans, people need to rise. They need to rise for justice, for peace, and dignity. Every African needs to have that dignity. A human being without a dignity is not a human being, it's just another being. And that's what our governments and multinational companies are doing to us. When you deprive me from accessing the most important basic need in life, that is water, they are depriving me from being a human being, because I can restore to anything. I can go down to anything to access water. That's why our mothers and sisters on the African continent are spending nights on queues to access water. So the young people who are listening, who might be seeing this video, it is your time to put your generation on the right track. The leadership will continue to fail you. Unfortunately, as Africa, we have more than 60 or 90% of our leadership are above 60, 70 years old. They have served their time, they have did their enjoyment. We really need to work together as young people, as women, to fight these injustices. It is our time to end these injustices. Nobody will come from anywhere to come and do it for us. It's our time to make it right. The small actions that you might take as an individual can be joined by many others to make a collective change. So, well, let's make water, access to water and privatization a no place in the world, especially in Africa. Let's rise up and challenge our governments and multinational companies that are coming to grab our water, that are coming to grab our basic need from us. If we do not rise up today, our children will not be happy with us because we have sold their future, we have sold their dignity, we have sold their life. Water is life. So let's work together and build the dignity of our generation and generations to come. Africans Rising is going to be ready to collaborate and work with all of you out there to push campaigns against water privatization in Africa and beyond. Because the world is linked. Coronavirus have shown us that the world is linked. We are all interdependent as human beings. One cannot survive without the other. When you look at the world, scientists will tell you our water channels are all linked around the world. So those who are in India or elsewhere, we must work together to ensure that we protect that water in India or in Palestine, so that those in Africa will also not suffer from the same challenges that they are faced with. As the world is linked, we must be able to work together to really deliver that better world that we all require to live in with dignity. So I will stop here, and then hopefully we'll take questions and respond to them. But Africans Rising actually does a lot of things around injustices that are affecting Africans wherever they are, and in general, human beings wherever they are. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Muhammad, for this really passionate and interesting and important comment on water privatization and also on African rising and Africa rising, and by showing us the importance of dignity for people, and importance of water, how water can be a symbol of dignity. You talked about women who are searching water every day. I just want to tell you something about it. Every year, women around the world are spending 200 million hours for searching water. Can you imagine? This is really big. This is really huge. And that time spending to search water could be used for an economic activity and for a social activity. And this is a real break for women rising, and this is really important. Thank you very much, Mohammed, for your words, and I hope that after this webinar, we will all, as you said, around the world, join our force to fight against that corporate greed, to fight against privatization of essential goods all around the world. Thank you very much. So actually, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Abdelrahman Tamimi. He will be our next speaker. Dr. Tamimi is a director of Palestinian Hydrology Group for Water and Environmental resources development at Ramallah. During the last 25 years, his activity will focus more on water resources, and he is an expert in water governance, water policy, water institutions, social conflict and water and environmental conflict in the Middle East. He is the author of the book Water Privatization and Regional Political Agenda, and he is a lecturer in Al Quds University Sustainable Development Institute postgraduate program. He is as well steering committee member of the Euro-Mediterranean Research Network on Migration. Thank you very much, Dr. Tamimi, for joining us. I'm sure that as Mohammed, he will be very passionate because all his activity is around water and water struggle. Dr. Tamimi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Fatou, and I would like to thank all speakers and also the organizers for this great opportunity for me to present some ideas about water problems in Palestine and actually in the entire Middle East. Actually, as I said earlier, water in the Middle East and especially in Palestine is not only a combination of oxygen and hydrogen. It's political, socio-economic, and environment. Inside these things, you can find human rights and discrimination also. Actually, the tensions here in water in the Middle East and in Palestine, I will come later to the Palestine-Israel, but just to give you a general background, because water is a Middle East issue, not only Palestine-Israel, but in Israel-Palestine water conflict, there is a special dimension additional to the Middle East water problems. We have a political dimension. Till now, Israelis, before the establishment of Israel, the Zionist groups, they started to use the water resources in the north of historic Palestine and the Arab countries, especially the Jordan River, and the Arab countries actually oppose and refuse these actions by Israelis. Also, there is a socio-economic tensions between different sectors in Palestine and in Arab countries. Around 75% of the available water goes to agriculture, because agriculture is the entry point and the main component of the food security, that it is very important for us. Also, since we are agricultural communities, poverty, water is very important for poor people, and there is a need for pro-poor water policies. Also, as I said, water is a basic human right. Also, there is environmental tensions. Despite the fact we have very limited water resources in Palestine, we have unlimited Israeli military orders preventing Palestinians to use the water as they want and to enjoy their life by providing water for agriculture or for drinking purposes. That's why we have limited resources but unlimited Israeli military orders. I will explain later. Also, because we have over exploitation of groundwater, Palestinian water in Gaza Strip is not suitable. It is not suitable for drinking, and Gaza in 2025 water-wise will be the place not to live, or the place is not suitable for living. Also, we have a population growth. We are 2.7% of population growth. We can't protect our water resources because the fragmentation caused by Israeli policies, especially the distribution of Israeli settlements and the construction of the apartheid wall. We will come to that by pictures and by maps later. Also, we have poor public institutions because the Israelis since 1967 till the establishment of the Palestinian Authority in 1994, the Israelis, they didn't develop a water institutions to serve the local people. However, they developed the good system, water supply system, and institution to provide the settlers water for drinking and agriculture. Also, time is very important for water because, as I said, we have population growth very fast. We have depletion of the aquifer, and we have increasing the pollution and irreversible damages to the aquifers because the Israelis, they have around 40 wells, groundwater wells scattered in West Bank, mainly in the Jordan Valley, and that wells are deep wells, have very large amount of water discharge, while the Palestinian wells are very shallow. And most of the Palestinian, not most of the Palestinian, 90% of the Palestinian wells drilled since British time or Turkish mandate or during Jordan time. That's why engineering age of the wells, Palestinian wells, are already out of order. This is the Jordan River. And Jordan River, it's if it is in North Africa, in North America, or in United States or in Canada, nobody will care about it. Also, if it is in Europe, nobody will talk about it. But this is very important river in the Middle East context because it is the only river in the area, the only river, the only permanent surface water. And it is like the lady in the single lady in the party. Everyone wants to dance with her, and this is what happening with the Jordan River. Everyone wants to control the Jordan River. Jordan River shared by 5 countries: Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine, and so-called Israel. And all the countries, they have share from the Jordan River. The river is accessible to them except Palestinians. Not only is not available to us, but also not accessible to us. We cannot go and enjoy just seeing the river. We cannot go to the river because it is security zone, and we cannot go just to enjoy watching water, not to take water. To watch water is not allowed to us. And you see here, if you see here, this is the Tiberias Lake. The Israelis, they call it Galilee Sea. And from the lake, the Israelis, they take, the lake is, as I said earlier, the lake is part of the river. And the Israelis, they diverted 75% of the river to the Negev desert to irrigate trees, while the Palestinians are left thirsty. This not only according to the international law, the Israelis, they diverted the river, and this is violation to the international law, but also prohibited Palestinians to use the river. And in the same time, the Palestinians, they cannot improve their socio-economic conditions because the water doesn't reach to them. If we look to the Jordan River, how it is utilized percentage-wise, Jordan is 23%, Israel is 58% of the river, and the Lebanon is 0.3. However, the Palestinians is zero percentage, while we have according the agreement or the protocol signed in 1953. In 1953, with the engineer from United States, who was the missioner from President Eisenhower, gives Palestinians 270 million cubic meter, which is 11% of the river. But nowadays, our quota is almost zero. When we come to the aquifers, to the groundwater, This is virtually the northeast aquifer. This is what we call it eastern aquifer, and this is the coastal aquifer, which is part of it in Israel and part of it in Gaza, and the western aquifer is part of it. Now the Israelis, when they diverted the river, when they diverted the river, this is what happened to the Dead Sea. You can see what happened to the Dead Sea. This is the Dead Sea, which is the final destination of the Jordan River in 1960. This is in 2000, and this is in 250. In my opinion, this is not only diversion of the river, it is environmental tourism, because the Israelis, they killing the most holistic and historic place in the world. Dead Sea is minus 400 below sea level, and this is killing the environmental and the historic and the religion value of the Dead Sea. And in 2070, Dead Sea will disappear totally because the Israelis diverted the mainstream, which is the Jordan River. And when we come to the aquifer, the Palestinians, I'm talking about Palestinian water, not Israeli water. The Palestinians, they are controlled 15%, and the Israelis, they control inside West Bank 18% and outside. But the resource, the recharge area is 67% in from West Bank, but controlled by Israelis. And that's why the Israelis, they did the wall, because the wall, if somebody from audience who is geologist, he knows what I am talking. The wall is on the so-called line between recharge area and discharge area. Now the recharge area is the mountains of West Bank. The discharge area is Israeli plains or Israeli platform. Now, why the Israelis constructed the wall? In my opinion, and this is evidence-based opinion, not only political opinion, but it is technical opinion. Israel constructed the wall because the water. By construction of the wall, Israel will control 400 million cubic meter, which should be used by Palestinians, but the Palestinians, they will not benefit from the so-called Western Aquifer, which is around 80% will be controlled by Israelis. Also, the Palestinian irrigated areas in the north of Jordan Valley and in the wall areas will be under Israeli control and will be annexed to Israel, because will be behind the wall. In other words, will be in Israeli side. The third reason, because there will be no water available for agriculture to Palestinians around the wall. The Palestinians will have no enough water for agriculture, and the Palestinians will depend on the Israeli products, and the Palestinian farmers will be cheap labor to the Israeli agricultural sector. That's why the Israelis, they constructed the wall. Additional to that, of course, is a psychological barrier between Palestinians and Israelis. And the claims of Israelis, the wall is for security. This is false claims, because rockets and wars and other arms will not be prevented, because the wall, the rockets came from Iraq to Tel Aviv. What the wall will be benefit for Israelis. That's why the wall is not security wall. It is really economic and psychological barrier, and the main reason is to control Palestinian water and the Palestinian agriculture. In 1991, the Minister of Agriculture in Israel was Rafael Eitan, and he published an official advertisement in Jerusalem Post newspaper, is Israeli newspaper. And in that time, Madrid conference for peace between Arabs and Palestinians just started. And he said why the Israelis should not give up the mountains of the West Bank because the water. He said we should not allow to Palestinian Authority in any time to control the mountains areas because this is the recharge area for water. And he suggested to construct a wall and to shift the so-called green line between Palestinians and Israelis 6 kilometers to the east to control more water. In 1995, when the Israelis has a coalition of government called two heads government, Labour Party and Likud Party, the Minister of Defense in Israel is Hak Mordechai. He suggested to move the first plan suggested by Rafael Etan. He suggests to move the wall 10 kilometers to the east to take more land from Palestinians and to control totally the Palestinian lands. Now, if we look to the discrimination, you see the average consumption, which is the blue colors. This is two villages, Palestinian village called Azbidat, and this is Arguman Israeli settlement. This is the average consumption per Palestinians per capita, 82 liter per capita a day, while the Israeli settler, it is just next door. They have 411 liter per capita, which means 5 times more than the Palestinians. The Israeli settlers in the same area, they have 5 times more water than Palestinians. The strangest thing to show the injustice between and the injustice in accessibility and availability water between Palestinians and Israelis, while the Israelis, they consume 5 times more than us, we pay 3 times more than the Israelis as cost of water. Not only discrimination on water distribution, but also on the pricing of the water. And this is the impact of the wall. This is how this is area of Jayus village and Al Falami village in the north of West Bank. This is the situation before the wall, and this is the situation after the wall. It's really a desertification process, and this desertification man-made and mainly by Israeli wall construction. Now, as I said, the socio-economic development of Palestinians very restricted because the Israeli settlers and because the annexation plan, which is a new plan. Actually, the annexation plan is already ongoing. The settlements expansions ongoing, and at the same time, the restrictions of the Palestinians and enclaving Palestinians villages to be like prisons, and the Palestinian high population will be in very small land, and this is the Israeli plan. In conclusion, the Israelis, they want to force the Palestinians to purchase desalinated seawater, because in Israel nowadays they have 12 desalination plants, 4 already constructed and 4 under construction and 4 are planned. And the private sector of Israel, they looking to the Palestinians as customers and the client to the desalination plants, while the Palestinian natural resources, especially water, will be used to expand the settlements, agricultural settlements, urban settlements, and at the same time industrial settlements. This is another issue. The Israelis all unfriendly environmental industries, they started to move it to the West Bank, and they using the West Bank as dumping places, like what's happening now in Salfit area. All chemicals and chemicals industry and all polluters industry move to West Bank among the Palestinian villages. That's why the Israelis, they want us as a customer to the desalination plan of Israel, and also they want us a dumping place for hazardous waste and toxic materials and industrial waste. That all things actually force me to say the Israeli not only killing the two-state solutions, but also they are killing the peace opportunity and killing any compromise and negotiation possibility in the future, because the Palestinians, they will be cheap labor to the Israeli market, they will be market to their products, and at the same time there will be no sovereignty to the Palestinians to control their water resources or to control their future actually for next generation, because without water in agricultural community life is impossible. I want to conclude and to say the Israelis not only they control water resources or control land or expanding settlements, but actually they killing the dignity of the Palestinians who are prohibited to move from area to area, and the Israelis now classified Palestinians to areas to A, B, C, and A is totally under Palestinian control, but the Israeli army every day is every night entering the Palestinian areas, and B area is under Palestinian and Israeli control, and no more the Palestinians can, I mean the Palestinian Authority can do nothing in that areas, and area C, which is 62% of the West Bank, under Israeli, totally under Israeli control. When we comes to Gaza, Gaza is the highest population growth in the world, and is around 2.5 million people in 360 square kilometer, and this is without water. As I said earlier, 95% of Gaza water is not suitable for a human consumption. All these things, after all these things, after all this discrimination, after all this injustice, the Israelis, they are looking to us as terrorists. And I think one person in Gaza or one nation in any country, when you are putting the cat on the corner, the cat will scratch you. We are actually, we are defending our rights. We are defending our dignity, which is important for any human being. And after that, of course, dignity is fully attached with water and land. This is in summary what I'm trying to say, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tamimi, for this also very passionate and very interesting presentation on what a struggle in Palestine. It's a little bit different, but we can see, sorry, we can see, Dr. Tamimi, from what you said, how Israel country, Israel government is beyond appetite, is greedy, because they want to make money on the water that is not their own. So this is important to really talk about and to really think about what Muhammad said in his conclusion. Sorry, talking about a global corporation or global alliances with all people from the South, to say no against this kind of privatization, say no against the Israel appetite in Palestine, because it starts in Palestine, but it's coming in Africa and maybe sure in Asia also. Israel is coming in Africa to privatize water and utilities in Africa. They are knocking some doors to privatize electricity, to privatize water, and we all know how it will be. They start with that and they finish with sorry. Sorry, go. Some young people are playing outside. So as I said, it is really the time to build a very big and a very global alliances among activists, among communities in the South to say no against that kind of privatization, to say no against that any kind of apartheid. Because as we all said, water is a symbol of dignity for all people. We need water to survive. We need water to be a human being. It's as simply as it. So after the Dr. Tamimi, it's my pleasure to introduce our comrade Meera. I'm sorry, Meera, if I don't pronounce very well your name. Meera Sanghamitra from India. Thank you very much. Meera is one of the national governor of National Alliance of People's Movement, a pan-Indian alliance of progressive organizations of struggling people. She volunteered full-time trying to extend solidarity to a cross-section of movement and connect with numerous groups in the subcontinent through protests, yatras, support, action, etc. Having studied law between March 28 to June 2016, she was involved full-time with the field and legal struggles of Narmada Bachao Andolan, sorry if I mispronounce it, the Indian social movement against a number of large dam projects across the river Narmada, which flows through the state of Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, and Maharashtra. Hope it is well pronounced, sister. She is an active member of many pro-people women rights, transgender rights group, and is an ally with diverse collectives fighting for their rights. She is also vocal in campaigns of judicial accountability and reforms, women against sexual violence and state repression, Mahila Kisan Adhikar Manch, All India Forum of Right to Education, Telangana Hijra Intersex Transgender Samiti, etc. So I'm sure that there is many things that we can that we will learn from Meera, and it will be, I'm sure, as passionate as it was with Lamin and with Dr. Tamimi. Meera, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Fatou. And I'm so pleased that you got all the pronunciations 100% right. That's so lovely. So thanks to all the organizers, in particular Maren and Apurva, for inviting me to this very, very significant webinar with a cross-section of solidarity between struggles from the Africas to Togo to Palestine to Brazil and Argentina. So yeah, all our solidarity from India with all your struggles, in particular struggles for water justice that all of you are leading in your nations. Actually, today, it's a very significant day for India as well. So I'll just briefly begin by mentioning the context of today's today in India. In 1949, on 26th August, India adopted her constitution. The document which gives to all its people, after a long drawn struggle against imperialism, India attained freedom in 47, political freedom, although obviously not economic and social freedom, and we are still struggling for that today. In 1949, the constitution was adopted, and we gave to ourselves, we the people of India gave to ourselves the constitution in which we spoke of all these values of equality, of liberty, of fraternity, of justice, of the dignity of the individual. I think all the panelists have been speaking about dignity. So all of these values were referred in the constitution, many of them in the preamble, in the preface of the Indian constitution. But looking back, I mean, 75 years, to cut a long story short, of course, I mean, we've had numerous struggles, we've had numerous journeys, and it is because of these struggles of the working class people, in particular farmers, workers, the displaced peoples who've been always, who were never treated as equal citizens in the entire development paradigm. It is because of, and various minorities, including religious minorities, including linguistic minorities, including other minorities, those oppressed by caste, class, gender, etc. It is because of primarily of the struggles of all these communities that India has journeyed this far, at least in terms of some progressive legislations, in terms of ensuring that some of the principles in the Indian Constitution are actually translated into reality. But with this background, what we also faced is, and I think many of you would be aware that, and this is something that many of us also share in common, we are all fighting fascist governments and increasing authoritarianism in all our countries. And that is so deeply linked with uh, a certain far-right approach of these governments, and also complete corporate takeover of our lives, corporate takeover of our natural resources, of everything. So particularly since it's not that it has started in the last few years, in fact, in the last 30 years, India has seen this downslide, and especially since the early 1990s, the whole package of privatization, liberalization, and globalization, which India also was very much a party to, led to actual disenfranchisement of millions of its working class people, especially farmers, workers, and common people, pushing them, downslide into the margins of, human standards of well-being. But particularly since 2014, since we don't have a lot of time, I'll just cut a long story short. Since 2014, ever since the Narendra Modi government had come to power in India, it was I mean, the scale of oppression and the scale of corporate loot and the scale of authoritarianism increased manifold. Uh, so when other friends over here speak of struggles of privatization of water, speak of how there are, I mean, for instance, one completely understands in the context of Israel and Palestine, how Palestine how Israel has always been oppressive of Palestine, not just in terms of occupation of the territory, but I think, as Dr. Tamimi has very rightly pointed out, in terms of appropriation of the resources and taking away the very dignity that people are so entitled to. This is something, I mean, if one can, obviously one cannot draw very similar parallels, because there are different forms of oppressions that we all see, but in some ways the patterns are also certain elements of the patterns of oppression are similar even within India. For instance, what India does to and has been doing to many of its regions in the northeastern part of the country, or to Kashmir, or to the entire Adivasi heartland, the tribal belt in central India. This is precisely what has been happening: appropriation of their resources and controlling through militarization, through literally at gunpoint. So these are huge chunks of lands where people, where entire communities dependent on forests, dependent on lands, dependent on rivers for their livelihoods, have been living since centuries. One particular struggle that I was part of, the Narmada Bachao Andolan, it's again a 35-year-old people's movement. I was with the struggle for almost close to a decade. But yeah, what we saw was precisely this. I mean, the promise that these large dams, that government is interested in the interests of the farmers, and therefore it is constructing these large dams. But what, in fact, this was something the Andolan had predicted long back, that the dams are not in the interests of farmers or the agricultural communities. They are eventually going to benefit large corporations, urban areas, and private interests. And that is exactly what we've been seeing in the past decade. This is something that the Andolan had predicted way back in the 1980s. But if we look at the pattern of how how the entire construction of the dam itself had happened. I mean, the pace, the costs of the dam having increased from like the initial amount of 4,000 crores to skyrocketing beyond 70 to, I mean, the recent statistics of up to 90,000 crores. So this whole skyrocketing of money investments largely only the physical structures, but no real investments in the actual canal network. So for instance, in the context of the Narmada River, where a whole series of cascade of dams were supposed to be built. I'm talking of one particular dam now, but the story is kind of similar across many different dams. The Sargasso Dam, which was one of the key dams because it was an interstate project basically, and the water benefits was exclusively supposed to go to the state of Gujarat, and the displacement impact was overwhelmingly in the state of Madhya Pradesh, almost close to 200 villages, and many of them again tribal Adivasi villages in Madhya Pradesh and in Maharashtra, and also in fact some villages in Gujarat. So it has been a very long drawn struggle against displacement, questioning the very fundamentals of the need for this huge dam that is really not going to benefit the small marginal farmers or the agricultural workers, but is in fact going to benefit corporate. So there has been a very long history of struggle against the dam, and as part of this, lot of issues. I think some of the previous speakers also spoke about corruption in such large projects. So one has honestly seen all of it: corruption in the construction works, corruption in the rehabilitation process. So this is all inbuilt in that very development paradigm. And therefore, when the Andolan questioned this paradigm, it was not an opposition in isolation. It was questioning of this paradigm of development that does not prioritize the interests of the working class people, that thinks that the working class people do not understand their livelihoods and their development properly, and therefore a certain model has to be imposed on them. And eventually now, after all these decades, people are literally left in tatters. I mean, their sustainable ways of living, their agriculture, which has been there for like the longest time. I mean, one of the most fertile lands is on the banks of the river Narmada. Having displaced people, having taken away those lands, and now having not even provided adequate livelihoods to those who've been affected, or even water to the areas that should have been reached within Gujarat. For instance, the canal network, the main canals have been constructed, but the remaining portion of the canal network, which will actually ensure that the tail end farmers in the Gujarat region receive benefits, that canal network, that entire canal network has still largely not been constructed. I mean, anywhere up to 50 to 60% of the work remains after so many decades. And I mean, information under the Right to Information Act has revealed that huge quantities of millions of liters of water has been provided to Mundra, to, I mean, industrial estates over there, and to cities including Ahmedabad, where cities like Ahmedabad were not part of the initial plan to provide water over there. So these are all instances of how the government promises something and actually ends up doing something very different and prioritizes the interests of basically the interests of those who vote them and give them electoral funding. So we've seen that Sargasso River is a case in point, but this is again the reality across multiple dams. We've seen that especially since 2014, when Modi government, it is in fact his pet project, our Prime Minister's pet project. So he exponentially took the decision to exponentially increase the dam height to 138 meters, which is the full dam height. And in the last 6 years, again, people have been fighting. And therefore, until now, the entire region has not gone under submergence, but even the large region that has been affected is some of the most fertile land. So recently, and our Prime Minister actually marks his birthday by inaugurating the statue, the Statue of Unity, it is called, whereas it actually it's a statue of destruction, the Sardar Patel statue. Adivasis who've been displaced since 5 decades in that region in Kevadia have not yet been rehabilitated. So it's a very terrible reality on the ground. But the only silver lining being that the movements which have fought have raised very fundamental questions, have postponed the destruction for the longest possible time, have taken issues, not just, for instance, even within India, the whole anti-displacement struggle in Narmada led to a whole range of sprouted so many struggles across the country, leading up to questioning even institutions like the World Bank that provide funding without any responsibility. the social environmental impacts of large dams. I think these have all been very significant contributions of the people's movement, and people continue to fight even to this day. Like they're literally, I mean, it's a hanging sword for the people on the ground, but they continue to fight it. That being the context of Sardar Sarovar, I would also like to briefly touch upon, since we're talking in the context of solidarity with friends from Palestine in India, and there is also this increasing market for drip irrigation in India. So many agri-businesses, but in particular companies like NAPM have been investing in largely, I mean, in fact, the region that I now stay in, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra, Karnataka. So it's not as if, in fact, drip as a form of irrigation has not been happening previously, but the way it is being projected by the Indian government, especially the current Modi government, who also has very close ties with Israel, promoting a cooperation which is in fact benefiting from the apartheid policy and oppression of Israel, is something that as activists in India, and in fact not just other activists, but also we see that many different farmers organizations, be it farmers organizations affiliated to the left parties or independent farmer organizations like the Karnataka Rajya Raita Sangha, have continuously questioned some of our state governments and also the center on the literally unscientific manner in which corporates like NAPM are being given a free hand to indirectly take over lands and promote drip irrigation. I mean, we've seen in the past decade and a half multiple exchanges in the form of learnings and scientists and agroeconomists coming to India to promote drip irrigation. But I mean, what one has also seen is in terms of experience, whether it is in Kuppam in Andhra or in the current ongoing horticulture projects that NAPM is trying to promote in Karnataka. It's not something that, I mean, we are primarily a country of small marginal farmers with very small holdings. And this is in fact increasing. I mean, more and more farmers are becoming tenant farmers. So the investments that, or the kind of technology that NAPM is trying to promote is not something that is going to benefit the farmers of our country in the long run. I mean, we've already had studies, whether it is by the Deccan Development Society or other farmers organizations, who've in fact pointed out how the impacts of this kind of technology is going to impact small and marginal farmers over a period of time. Kuppam, in fact, is a classic example where farmers have had to sell their lands over time. And what has also happened is, I mean, it starts off as an innocuous introduction of drip irrigation, but also eventually leads to making the farmer dependent on various forms of other external inputs like chemical fertilizers, etc. So this whole model is something that is unsustainable. So the struggle has been for introducing sustainable models of irrigation and not unsustainable interventions, especially not by discriminatory and oppressive corporations like NAPM. So that is part of the struggle by farmers organizations in India, and definitely in that context, I think all of us are in solidarity with BDS, with the Stop the Wall campaign, who've been raising this issue continuously, from your end as well. And I would just like to briefly end by also saying that today in India, in fact, we've had today the whole day, and since yesterday, there have been major protests against the recent 3 farm acts that the government of India has introduced. In fact, for many months now, massive resistance has been going on against all these farmers acts, which are eventually going to, I mean, literally hand over land, literally hand over price control, literally hand over the markets to agri-businesses, and take away the protection that farmers have, take away most of the essential commodities from the list of, I mean, the protections that are presently afforded by the public sector. So these are extremely critical issues that a large section of farmers have been fighting in India, and we also look forward to solidarity from all of you over there. And as we talk of water, water is not a struggle in isolation. It is so deeply connected to soil, to environment, to farming, to all our other human rights. We've also been struggling against, there's this entire regime to, again, dilute labor laws. Over decades and decades, the labor law regime was built in India, and literally, I mean, workers have fought for each and every single legislation, and now all of that is being dismantled through a bunch of so-called labor codes. So that is also a huge struggle that's going on in India. As of now, even as I speak, thousands and thousands of farmers and workers are on the roads. So this is the background in which we are extending our solidarity and are also requesting solidarity from all of you with the struggles in India. We completely understand that, I mean, our comrades in Palestine have been part of a heroic struggle for so many decades. So we do know that, I mean, for instance, we've not been able to do justice to our Kashmiri brothers and sisters who are so much more closer at home. So we really don't know how much of beyond certain forms of solidarity, how are we actually going to strengthen your in terms of solidarity, extending more solidarity to Palestine, but definitely in spirit and also in whatever possible ways we completely relate, connect to. I've been very keenly listening to all these speakers, in fact, and especially Tamimi Saab when he spoke of how this entire regime, I mean, it literally brought one to tears when he said that even the remotest possibility of some kind of, I mean, the two nations living in peace, I mean, they are completely, this corporatization is going to extinguish that last possibility as well. So it's actually, I think we are at the brink of many of such very difficult situations, and this entire larger regime of capitalist, this one is on looming overhead. So I think these are questions that all of us as progressive people's movements across countries and across struggling nations have to think over. Our solidarity with all of you who are on this panel and with your struggles, and I hope that the values that we have been fighting for as part of our movements, whether it is dignity, equality, and the basic right to life, we will continue to, despite the many, many challenges, we will continue to assert them, and we will continue to hold these corporations accountable, hold the governments accountable, and despite all the difficulties, make democracy a reality. All our solidarity to all of you. Thank you.
Solidarity, Meera, thank you very much. And as I said, it was also really passionate talking about what struggle in India, and also the solidarity you showed to Palestinian struggle. We all show that same solidarity. So as I said it after the Tamimi intervention, it is the right time to take to sit together and to talk about global cooperation. I will say it again and again, but for me, it is the most important actually things to do because we are all suffering for the same problem. We all have the same problem. Privatization is going worse and worse, and corporate greed is rising instead of human rights. Where human rights is not rising, but corporate greed is rising. We have to stop it, and we have to do it at the level of the community, at the regional level, but also globally, to show our solidarity and our support to every community on the world suffering and because of privatization, because of corporate greed. This was really nice, Meera. Thank you very much for joining us for this wonderful presentation. It was very interesting, very passionate, as I said it. So actually, let me welcome our sister, Tilda. So Tilda will present in hola. I think that's the only word I know in Spanish. Tilda will present in Spanish, so we all need to change our channel. You can see downstairs interpretation. So you have to click there and change the channel. So you will have the interpretation from Spanish to English. Okay, so actually, she will be our last speaker. Unfortunately, we are at the end of this very passionate webinar. So our sister Tilda is the president of the Federation of Argentino-Palestinian Entities and a long-time Palestine activist. She has been leading the successful campaign to stop Merco's deal for a water depuration plant in La Planta, Buenos Aires, which led to the first important BDF victory in Latin America. So before you start, just congratulations for all you did in Palestine, but also the struggle you were doing for a better life for everybody. Thank you very much. The floor is yours, sister.
Quiero, antes que todo, saludarles a todas, a todes, mandar mis saludos por este esfuerzo a los compañeros de Stop the Wall y en esta iniciativa de unir a nuestro sur global. Yo quisiera, en todo caso, decirles que en el año 2010 el gobernador de lo que fue la provincia de Buenos Aires viajó a lo que se conoce como Israel para hacer un preacuerdo para instalar Mecorot en la Argentina. Afortunadamente, como comunidad palestina en la diáspora, siempre nos interesó trabajar de manera casi transversal, uniendo sectores políticos, de derechos humanos, organizaciones sindicales y, por supuesto, es decir, con la sociedad civil toda. Y ese ha sido nuestro proyecto de vida, es lo que más nos interesa. Y es así que en el año 2010 nos enteramos que el ex gobernador de la provincia de Buenos Aires, Scioli, había hecho un viaje a lo que se llama Israel para amañar o acordar un acuerdo sobre la explotación de aguas en la Argentina. Preocupados por esto, decidimos tener un encuentro primero con expertos hídricos y es así que comenzamos a ver que el tema del agua no es solamente un reclamo legítimo porque el derecho al agua, es decir, cómo creamos empatía con el otro, cómo el otro se solidariza con algo que no conoce. Entonces, por lo tanto, no era un tema solamente de que se estaba lucrando con la sangre del pueblo palestino, sino que también se está lucrando con la sangre y el sudor y el trabajo de nuestro pueblo, en este caso el argentino. Y digo esto ¿por qué? Porque el 11 de enero del 2011 se anuncia, luego de su visita a lo que se llama Israel, una licitación con Mecorot, esa empresa que realmente genera, digamos, el expolio de los derechos del agua del pueblo palestino. Frente a esto, y ya habiendo obtenido el conocimiento de lo que significa comentaba, esta alianza, hacemos el Comité Argentino de Solidaridad con el Pueblo Palestino, conjuntamente con la Federación y Stop the War, comenzamos a transitar un camino y entregando a los legisladores de la provincia de Buenos Aires un petitorio para que esta licitación, que además fue una licitación bastante mañosa, un poco clara, fuera suspendida. Estamos hablando del 2010, 2012 se hace, digamos, el pedido formal a la legislatura, es decir, al órgano legislativo de la provincia de Buenos Aires, para que no se concrete la planta potabilizadora regional de aguas en la ciudad de La Plata. Bueno, a partir de allí hacemos contacto con algunos legisladores de la legislatura porteña, bonaerense, y hay un legislador que en ese momento era de la oposición, Oscar Negrelli, decide tomar esto como un objetivo, al plantearse además que a los argentinos no solamente era una cuestión de solidaridad con el pueblo palestino, también tenía que ver con su propia realidad, que era el encarecimiento, digamos, o sea, que hasta casi un 170% del valor real del agua, y estamos hablando de agua potable, en el caso de Mecorot, era agua potable para los ricos y agua corriente para aquellos que no pueden pagar. Concluyendo, en el año 2013, el diputado Oscar Negrelli, de la coalición cívica en ese momento, opositor al gobierno, decide un pedido de informe que ya en el 2013 comienza a cobrar fuerza y se concreta en el 2014 con el levantamiento de este acuerdo espurio. Es decir, había una batalla ganada, una batalla de alguna manera muy importante ganada, y de un nivel de conciencia de la población. Y esto se fue gracias a las organizaciones políticas, sindicales, los especialistas, las organizaciones de derechos humanos, es decir, con el trabajo conjunto de la sociedad civil argentina, que es un eje fundamental para todos y todas nosotras en este mundo. Y a partir de allí hemos venido profundizando todo lo que es el BDS, todas las acciones. Ahora, esta gran batalla ganada no implica hemos ganado totalmente a lo que es el sionismo, porque hace unos días salió en las noticias de Argentina que hay un intento nuevamente de Mecorot de instalarse en nuestro territorio. Por lo tanto, ya estamos siendo alertados. El gobernador actual de la provincia ha dicho que va a ser, digamos, se va a someter a una licitación. Pero nosotros vamos a entregarles además los estudios que en su momento se hicieron de factibilidad, que es el eje de toda esta cuestión. Yo no sé si me están escuchando, pero en todo caso, lo fundamental es que, como digo siempre y decimos desde el Comité Argentino de Solidaridad con el Pueblo Palestino, la lucha de los pueblos es una sola. Por lo tanto, para mí es muy importante esta conexión sur-sur, y no olvidarnos además de que al ser pueblos originarios estamos mucho más expuestos a ser, digamos, al intento de la colonización, de la limpieza étnica, en todos los aspectos. Si no, veámoslo acá, con nuestros pueblos originarios, sobre todo en el sur de la Argentina, que tienen una privación del acceso al agua y aparte la gran parte de su territorio ancestral. Por lo tanto, vuelvo a insistir, la lucha de los pueblos es una sola. Convocarnos nuevamente a que el sionismo no descansa, en comenzar, es decir, el nivel de conciencia que se va creando en nuestros propios pueblos es muy importante. Hace que cuando surge la empatía, y vuelvo a insistir en esto, cuando yo no puedo amar lo que no conozco, yo no puedo amar lo que me es extraño. En el momento en que yo puedo conocer a ese otro y ese otro soy yo, comenzamos a activar el sentido de la solidaridad. Y bueno, yo no me queda mucho más por decir, solamente agradecer a todos los ponentes el hecho de permitirme estar aquí. Yo solamente soy una transmisora de alguna manera de un proyecto que tiene que ver con todas, todes y con el sentido de humanidad que de alguna manera nos convoca hoy acá. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Sister Tilda. I'm sure that your presentation was wonderful. And maybe Maren, after the translation of this presentation, can share it with all of us. So we will learn a little bit on what you are doing and on the wonderful job you're doing every day. So we are at the end of all the presentation. So we don't have a lot of time. We are out of our time, but we can still open the micro for those who want to have comments or questions to ask to our speakers, or to just give some comments on what was saying during this webinar. So the floor is yours, comrades. You can just raise your hand and ask for question. I also noted 2 questions from Kyle Juhum to Abdelrahman, to the Dr. Abdelrahman Tamimi. So let us just take the name of those who want to ask question or to make comment, and then I will read the 2 questions. Thank you. So I think that we can just give the floor to Dr. Tamimi to answer the question, and if during that he responds, if we have someone who wants to comment or to ask questions to our speakers, just raise your hand, and after Dr. Tamimi, you will have the floor. So the question, we have 2 questions from Carl Juhom. I hope that I pronounced it well. The first one is, does Jordan use water from Jordan? Yeah, I think it's that, from Jordan.
Yes.
This is the first
yeah, I think yeah, for the first question, I think the question is about Jordan, if they use water from the
Jordan River, yeah.
Yeah, from the, yes, according the peace agreement between Israel and Jordan, which is signed in 2004, I think. The Jordanians, they have around 100 million cubic meter a year from the Jordan River, 50 million cubic meter in the winter, and another 50 in the summer, and most of them also from Yarmouk River, which is one of the branches of the Jordan River. In my opinion, this is not the whole share of the Jordan, but actually it's around 80% of the Jordanian demand from the river. If you compare it with the Palestinians have zero from the Jordan River. That's why I think it's unfair, and we cannot sign agreement with Israelis to share the Jordan River, because also we look to our water resources as integrated body, that Israelis, they use the groundwater aquifers, and they consider the along the river lands is a security zone. That's why we don't have accessibility and availability to the Jordan River, and the Jordanians actually they do it. Before the occupation, there was two plans. One is to do so-called East Gore Canal and West Water Canal, one in the Jordanian side and one in the Palestinian side, to use the Jordan River for agriculture. Unfortunately, the Jordanians, they did their canal, and the Palestinians, the Israelis, prohibited them to do the canal. That's why we don't have infrastructure to use the water, which is our share from the Jordan River.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tamimi. Marwan just posed another question. It was in Spanish. The comrades want to know more about the method of desalination of the Israeli water companies.
Yes, the Israelis, they have different desalination plants. The 4 desalination plants constructed is two methods up to my knowledge. One is reverse osmosis and one is multi-flash stages, what we call it multi-flash stages. I don't know details about their technology. I know about their politics.
Sure. Not very good politics. Thank you very much, Dr. Tamimi, for answering those questions. And Marwan, unless I do not see any other comment or question there. So can we just give another the floor to the speakers for just each speaker less than 1 minute, please. If you have any comment on what others say, please less than 1 minute, because we are really out of time. Yeah, can we start with Dr. Tamimi?
Yeah, it's less than 1 minute. If you see what's going on in all around the world about water in Africa, in Latin America, there is two common things. The first one is the hegemony of the big powers, either large companies, multilateral companies, or governments, liberal, I mean capitalism mentality. And there is also hegemony from Israelis to Palestinians, because they use their not financial power, but there is their arms power.
Yes, very well said, and it is really true. Thank you very much, Dr. Tamimi. Meera, Tilda, Muhammad, do you want to say something on it? Less than 1 minute, please. No?
Let me allow Meera to go, and then I can come in after that.
Go ahead, Mohammed.
Yeah, okay. Just to say that, you know, is something that we cannot go without. So that's why it is critical for us to collaborate in this fight to defend our dignity together. So either in Palestine or in Argentina or in India or Europe or in Africa, we all need to communicate frequently. We need to share what we are struggling with so that we can build that global solidarity to defend our dignity. So water is life, and that life we all have to live it together. Thank you.
I agree totally.
Thank you very much, Mohammed, for that word. So, Meera?
I was just thinking that, in fact, a lot of what we kind of articulate today is in some ways also an inheritance of the struggles over generations. So how do we nurture and take forward all of those learnings is something extremely significant. So maybe as young people across movements, across countries, we should be able to also nurture these learnings. And because in some ways, yeah, we do have newer challenges, but I think in some ways life has also definitely, I mean, because of the advantage of communication and technology and access that we have in these times, it's probably not that difficult as our previous generations to be able to understand and get information about struggles in other places. So I think that also then increases our responsibility to actually engage much more to understand the nuances of struggles elsewhere and contribute in more constructive and continuous ways to people's movements. So I think as young people, all of us have that responsibility towards each other much more.
Exactly.
And we owe it to our previous generation.
Right. Thank you very much, Meera, for that last word. Tilda, so we need also to change the channel. I hope that this one will be clear. But it's less than 1 minute, so let's try. So let's go to interpretation and choose English channel.
Fatou, she can speak here and someone can actually interpret in the main channel.
Bueno, agradecer a todos en el panel y decir que seguiremos batallando y luchando porque es importante visibilizarnos y como eje fundamental el poder estar unidos en esta causa. Ahí veo a compañeros de la región como Uruguay también y estamos todos trabajando en esto. Porque tiene que haber conciencia y la conciencia, vuelvo a insistir, es la empatía de los pueblos, es el poder transformar la ignorancia en saber y conocimiento, y eso nos dará la posibilidad de seguir hasta la victoria. Gracias.
We have to keep going. We have to stay united, keep on working on this to raise awareness and to transform ignorance to knowledge to fuel the continuation of our struggle. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tilda. Thank you very much, Eric. We are actually at the end of our webinar. It was really a real pleasure for me to share this great panel with wonderful speakers. First of all, I want to thank Maren, you and your team for organizing this webinar. Thanks very much to our speaker, Muhmmed Lamin, Dr. Abdelrahman Tamimi, Meera, Tilda. Thanks to the participants that follow the panels, and also a very big thanks to our interpreter, Luis Rocha from Afro-Descendant Interpreter Collective, and Eric Schwartz. Thanks also to Oscar from BDS Colombia, who was helping with the live stream in Spanish. Thank you very much for joining us once again. It was real pleasure. The struggle continue, and as we stated in Southern Africa, a man la away to people, power to people. Thank you very much.
Inqilab Zindabad, as we say in India.
Please say it again.
Inqilab Zindabad.
Inqilab Zindabad. Thank you very much.